welcome to what I think is the coolest pillow tutorial I have done yet. This is an origami style pillow, and what I really like about it is that it has these beautiful pleats in it, so when it sits on a couch, it looks a little bit more 3D. It is not as hard as it looks. However, I would say it's in between a beginner to an intermediate skill level. So let's jump into this tutorial and make ourselves an origami pillow. You will need 2 fat quarters for the front of your pillowcase, a fat quarter for the back, as well as some scrap fabric as a center lining. The first thing that you'll do is you'll take your 2 fat quarters for the front of your project, and you will cut 2 squares 18 inches by 18 inches. And then you will cut each square from point to point, so you will end up with 4 triangles when you're done. Next, you will lay out your triangles so that they are opposite each other. And then take one triangle and lay it right sides together against the other triangle. Pin across that inner edge, and you will sew a 1/4 inch seam across that edge. Then you will do the same thing for the other 2 triangles. Then we will press those seams open. Now we are left with 2 triangles, and you will do the same thing. Lay both triangles right sides together. This time you will match up the center seam first, pin that first, and then work your way to the outer corners, pinning along the entire edge. Take that to your sewing machine and sew a 1/4 inch seam across that edge, finishing by pressing that seam open as well. And now it's time to do our fun origami square. To do this, you will mark from the center point out 3.5 inches using a water-soluble marking pen, pencil, whatever marking tool you have, 3.5 inches out from that center point along all 4 seams. And now we need to start folding our edges. To do this, we are going to focus on 1 triangle at a time. So turn your fabric so that you have 1 triangle. I'm going to focus on my turquoise triangle on the bottom right. I'm going to pinch the top of that triangle upwards to line it up to my first marking point. Then pin across that top edge. Now just turn your project slightly to the left so that you can focus on the next triangle. For myself, it will be the yellow triangle. And I will look at that top seam, I'll pinch it, and I'll pull it up towards my marking point of the next triangle. This is probably the hardest fold of all of the folds. You'll line it up and pin it straight across from that mark. Pin that seam in place and then twist it and do the same thing for the next 2 seams as well. Once you've folded and pinned all 4 of those edge seams, now it's time to straighten out the center of our square. So first I'll just use my fingers and straighten out my square the best that I can. And once I have it as straight as I think that I can get it, I will grab my measuring gauge and I will measure out from the center to the outer points and make sure that they are all about the same measurement. That way I know that my square is nice and perfect. And then you'll press it into place. To do this, make sure that the pins that you're using are either heat resistant or they're out of the way of your iron. The pins that I like to use are these magic pins, and they are heat resistant, and I find that they work really well. I will definitely link to them in the description down below if you're interested in buying them. Once I'm happy with how my center square looks, then I'll grab my measuring gauge and I'll measure all 4 of my pleats to make sure that my fold that's close to the square is a similar distance fold to the bottom edge of my square. I hope that makes sense. So I'll just grab my pins and I'll adjust it and I'll press all 4 pleats into place as well. And now it's time to square this entire project up. So what I'll do is I'll actually take the measurement from my center square out towards my ruler, and I'll use that measurement as a guide around all 4 edges. That way my center square stays centered as I square this project up. I hope that that makes sense. And this is what the project will look like so far. Now we want to tack all 4 corners down of our centered square. To do this, I used a really nice thick jean thread, but if you want to use an embroidery thread or any other thicker thread that you have, that will work too. I tacked all 4 corners down using a cute little X, but you could easily just do a straight stitch as well. Now that we've tacked our center square in place, it's time to add a lining. Now this lining can be any scrap fabric as long as you can't see through it from your top fabric. So if you used white fabric for part of your origami top, then definitely make sure that you've got like a nice white cotton lining in behind. I'm using this slippery lining because it's what I had in my scrap fabric, but I would prefer to use a cotton fabric. So you'll just trim around the entire outer edge, cutting yourself a lining that matches your top. Now the reason for the lining is because you've created these beautiful pleats on the front, but there are also pleats on the back because of it. And because we're not tacking our pleats down, because I like the 3D look of the pleats, when you're putting your pillow insert inside your pillow when it's all finished, it could get hooked on those pleats and wreck your pillow over time. And attach it using between 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 inch seam. And now it's time to do the back of our fabric. So grab that last fat quarter if that's what you're using. Measure the width of the top of your pillow. So for myself, that ended up being 18 inches by 18 inches. And you'll cut that back piece of fabric 18 inches by 11 inches. If you're not using a fat quarter, I would actually suggest 18 inches by 13 to 14 inches, because then you won't need to add little Velcro tabs at the end. Your envelope pillow will work. But if you are working with a particular color that you really wanted, like me, and you only had it in a fat quarter, then this is how I did it. Take both of your cut back pieces of fabric and just press a 1/2 inch down along one edge and then a 1/2 inch down again, creating a nice finished edge. Take that to your sewing machine and sew a seam along that inner section of the fold. And now it's time to take those 2 backing pieces and lay them right sides together on top of our nice front origami pillow. Then pin all the way around, and we will sew a 1/2 inch seam allowance this time around the entire outer edge. For myself, I do like to do a back stitch on all 4 seams that meet for that back envelope style pillow, because they often get tugged on when you're putting your pillow insert in, so I like to ensure that they are really secured in place. And then it's time to clip away all 4 corners, making sure not to clip too close to that seam. Then turn your project right side out, push those corners out gently, and then you'll do one final press around those outer edges to really crisp up your pillowcase and finish it up. Oh, and of course, don't forget to wipe away those water-soluble markings that we did earlier on in the process. And as you can see here, I did add 2 Velcro tabs to close up my envelope pillowcase. If you guys like this tutorial, please give it that thumbs up, as that really helps YouTube share my videos to other people that may be interested in the same types of topics. And of course, hit that subscribe button so you don't lose me in and amongst all of those other sewing tutorials that are also fantastic, by the way. I am loving that YouTube is just filling up with some great sewing content. I hope that you guys have a wonderful day, and I will see you next time. Bye for now.